But on that note, that very important question, how do you institutionalize courage? How do you even start to think about institutionalizing normative ethics even?
I think, is that the only question? I'm sure there are other questions.
No, this is a question that we decided upon earlier. There will be more questions from the audience.
See, we have to have some role models, at least for the younger generation, of people who've questioned power and paid with their lives or very dearly for standing up for those values.
Or leaders who have welcomed that dissent, which has also happened in the past.
And we need to keep reminding ourselves that all this exercise of brutal power is also a phase in history. Julius Caesar, the famous example, every time he won a war and rode into Rome, he had a person standing behind him in his chariot just to whisper in his ear that this too shall pass. So that is the eternal hope of humankind, that all brutal regimes, oppressive regimes will have only a limited shelf life. And there will be a time again when people are able to assert their rights, speak their voices. So this is a cyclical phase, which is what we should believe in. And there are enough role models around us, which we should pick up and speak about, of people who fearlessly fought for people's rights.
Also, I have to say something in defense of the powers that be. You have to sometimes discover whether the narrative that is being churned out is actually true or not. And in this era, right, whether there is really that much, whether there is that much government excess, right? There are government excesses, undoubtedly. But to use a few examples, right? For instance, you waxed eloquent about the farmers' protest. The farmers' protest, withered out on its own, it was given a long rope, and ultimately the bill was withdrawn. The bill was withdrawn.
But because of the
protest. So government succumbed. Yes, you have to have endurance.
What do we have to say about the fourth estate, the press? And this is the information age, this is the post-truth age in a way. How does post-truth media distribute?
This is also the era of cliched narratives. I mean,
That is post-truth.
Body media, prove it. Just because they happen to support the government, what does that mean? Are they in the pocket of the government? Are they being put? No.
They're not critical
they
enough.
They're ideologically aligned with this government. So yes, it'll happen. Right? You've got to face the hard thing.
But where are the checks and balances there, sir? If media is ideologically aligned,
Yes.
where is the check and balance for somebody who's not part of that narrative?
But being aligned is also freedom of expression.
It is.
It is.
It is.
I mean, you don't have to be necessarily, if you find a government is doing a good job, right? Or you can be, extremely bipartisan. You can be fair in your criticism. You can sometimes criticize the government and sometimes not criticize the government, right? So, I would not back this generalization of either the opposition or the ruling party or any institution like the media, etc., is something which lawyers should rebel against, because we deal in facts. We don't deal in narratives. We can see through false narratives. We've exposed them in court sometimes. So,
Sometimes.
Yes. So, the fact of the matter is, ultimately, this is as good a system as it gets, I'm afraid to say, right? If you want to make it better, you have to do it yourself. There are institutions and there are people who man those institutions. If the institutions or the men who man them are proving
Or the women.
Or women. I mean, sorry. Persons. I stand corrected at persons. Right? If they are flawed, there are checks and balances. If those checks and balances don't work, you have the ultimate remedy of voting out the government after 5 years. You can punish them repeatedly because elections in this country are repeated every 6 months.
Electoral accountability. Yes.
Yes, I mean, you throw them out in a state election, punish them then. But it's not happening. I think sometimes narratives have been churned out because a government which is in power now, right, and doesn't conform to a particular prescription or a particular ideology, people are now beginning to get frustrated at this continuance in power. But ultimately, it's the mandate of the people that puts governments in power, and that's the only mandate that counts. What happens? The excesses in individual cases, in individual areas is unfortunate. But if a government triumphs again and again and again, right, you can't blame the government. The excesses are meant to be cured by those vested with the power to remedy them. And if they don't exercise their powers, then change the people who man those institutions.
Justice Muralidhar, at least there's electoral accountability when it comes to the government.
See, I come from a very different place as far as media freedom is concerned. I don't think a submissive, servile media is exercising its freedom. Media is controlled by corporate houses. Media is controlled by an economic model which believes in the bottom line of the balance sheet. It's a known fact that a newspaper or a television channel that questions the government in power will lose its advertisement revenue. And if Mahesh wants facts, all these are documented. Because there are enough studies on media functioning in the public domain, including the Indian media, and how on the World Freedom of Press Index, where we rank. These are all documented, these are all facts. But Mahesh might turn around and say, I have the freedom to question these studies. I have the freedom to say there is a conspiracy to, depict Indian media in a poor light. He has the freedom to say it, and maybe he would say it, correct? So, yes.
We'll
So
take
this is the point. I'm saying their facts are all before us. We don't have to go around hunting and running around for facts. When I sit before television channels, let me ask Seshu. Seshu sits before the television channels. There are certain channels Seshu will watch, and certain channels he'll say, no, I'm not even going to watch this. I know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
So there are today, there was a pattern when television channels were completely owned by political parties. I can speak from Tamil Nadu's experience. You had the DMK controlled channels and the AIDMK controlled channels. My mother would watch 5 minutes of this channel and 5 minutes of that. I would ask her why. She'll say, I want to know the response to this and that channel. So people understand that media is already captured. So some people will still go and watch those channels where they find something objective being said. Like people in this room know which newspapers say what kinds of things. In the US, if you're an avid watcher of Fox News, everybody knows what your politics is, right? If you're watching a Rupert Murdoch channel, everybody knows what your politics is. So there's nothing new. Control of media by corporate houses, control of media by political parties, the killing of media freedom is not a news story. I think Mahesh must have read, for me it was an eye-opener, John Pilger's Hidden Agenda, where Pilger says the minute the newspaper office knew that Murdoch had taken over the newspaper office, the reporters knew that certain stories will get killed at even the assistant editor's desk. They would even cross that desk. Mahesh, having represented many journalists and media houses, know how stories get killed, how certain stories never get carried. So there is nothing new. I'm saying as part of the churning of democracy, there will always be a constant attack on the media. But there will be, like I said, the human spirit is resilient. There will be those areas, whether it's on the big, wide, worldwide web or wherever, where that independent, fearless voice will be heard.
YouTube and blogs.
And a person wanting to know the truth will go to that channel. I know today in my whole array of channels, which channels are objective and which are not. As that much I think we should merit the viewer with.
Right.
The small person with a small inch of power. So we are really hoping that that will then transform into a sensible voting pattern. And like Mahesh says, for democracy to actually work in action.
On that note, we'll take a few questions from the audience.
Good evening, sirs. Thank you for this great discussions. Taking a cue from what sirs have said here, the question is, as we look at our institutions, we see that transparency is something that gets essential for democracy to function and democratic values to come in, as sir has rightly pointed out. So for example, with the Supreme Court, now that collegium resolutions are published, this came in after the whole NJAK issue. How do you think on both sides or different ambits or arms of the government, how can transparency then be pushed forward to ensure that these questions of jadedness go away and we ensure that the separation of powers are then truly seen? Thank you.
Shall we take 2 or 3 together?
I think the audience is enjoying the panel too much, so perhaps we'll let them.
There was a question there, please.
Just a counter view, sir. I traveled from Gurgaon here. Took 1.5 hours to do 20 kilometers. And this is not this evening. Every day is like that. So we have the 3 pillars of democracy. We have the media. We have everybody. We had electoral politics also. Gurgaon is a hellhole today. Broken roads, garbage all over the place. Yet they came back with a thumping majority. What do you have to say to that?
Answer the first question first. I'm for transparency permeating every institution, including judicial decisions. But I don't see the judiciary permitting that for a long, long time. And there are sometimes good reasons. There may be intelligence reports which may be unflattering to a particular judge. You'll ruin his whole life, right? The intelligence reports may not be true because intelligence reports are only intelligence reports. They're not facts sometimes, right? They're just tidbits of information. So I'm all for transparency, even there. But there may be higher reasons to prevail, and I think the judiciary is the best judge of what should be revealed and what should not be revealed, right? I'm with you. I mean, but then again, you know, we come to the answer as to who's responsible. You said the same evils persist and they are brought back to power. But who brought them back to power? The electorate. So we have to, much as I dislike that subsequent result, that the repeated victory of a particular regime, right? The fact of the matter is we have to respect the mandate until that dispensation is finally removed from power. But until when the people have spoken through the ballot box, you have to respect it.
No, I think it comes back to the same, your question. How much do we believe in all these things? We must, actually, as people in power, we must believe in transparency, right? We must believe in accountability. You know, in Delhi High Court, we said the Office of the Chief Justice is a public authority under the RTI Act. It took another 8 years for the Supreme Court to agree with us. And even now, if you file an RTI, it's not easy to get information. It's not easy to get information on PM cares. It's not easy to get information on money bonds, electoral bonds. It's not easy to get information on so many things on the working of governments, whether it's the state government or the central government or parliament. See how many of the bills tabled in parliament. Mahesh, being a member of parliament, you'd get all the bills in advance. How many of those bills are in public domain? How many of those bills we get to see before they're tabled in parliament? We don't. How many of these are discussed? Mahesh says he was part of some committees. But how consultative are those committees, right? These are all real questions, our lawmaking process, involvement of people in that process. So it is, that's why I'm saying we have to consider it as a work in progress, right? As long as we are in those institutions, we are in those positions of power, let's contribute our little bit to making it more transparent. Like in Orissa, I have a PIL portal. No other High Court has a PIL portal. I put on display what are the PILs, what are the orders in the PILs, what are the affidavits filed and the reports filed in the PIL. A little attempt at transparency, right? Because so many things are said in response to a PIL, which is not available otherwise in public domain, but which people should know. Some home secretary, some finance secretary, some labor secretary saying things which otherwise the person would not say because it's a court that has asked the question. He's saying it in response to a petition. So the PIL portal was the first step at transparency. Then in Orissa High Court, we published annual reports. So I'm saying, whatever position you are in, you try and improve, what is the level of transparency and accountability of that position. And I think little bit, all these small efforts might build up to a greater effort, or will leave behind what are called good practices and good examples for others to follow.
I agree. The change has to be incremental. I fully agree with him. And that means just because you can't make sweeping changes, it doesn't mean you give up the effort.
And if I may just add to that, your question, there's a legal scholar by the name of Gautam Bhatia. He has a very fine blog. And he's recently written about a case from the Kenyan Constitution Court, where the issue was whether a constituency is a political unit or the recipient of service delivery. Is it a client or is it a political unit? And the Constitution Court ruled that it is only a political unit and not a client, which is a conceptual thing, but it matters because then it percolates down to the idea that we are not mere labharthis. We are not mere beneficiaries of schemes, of charitable schemes. We have rights. We are political beings. And in that sense, I liked that idea very much. You have a question? Yeah.
My name is Akriti Tripathi. Firstly, sir, thank you so much, and for the panelists for such an engaging discussion. My question is based on something very fundamental. We've talked of so many lofty and heavy concepts of transparency and accountability, and I couldn't help but wonder. So I am in the education profession, and I was just wondering that in this entire discourse, how do you see education playing a role as a change maker, as a polarizer, or maybe sort of like a balancing agent? This is just something that I wanted to talk to you about, that how do you see yourself as practitioners, as academicians, as lawmakers? This is just something that I wanted to kind of bring the question back to the basics.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so it might disturb you to know that the classroom in a school is a microcosm of society, right? Where we plant seeds of prejudice. So you should know that there is a powerful report recently published in Tamil Nadu by Justice Chandru, where he has talked about how caste plays out in the classroom in the schools in rural Tamil Nadu. Boys of certain castes wear colored wristbands to actually exhibit the kind of caste they belong to. And at that level, they oppress the Dalit students, the scheduled caste students. And if a boy from a Dalit background is seen talking to a girl of the upper caste, the boys of the upper caste become the vigilante group in the classroom. And I'm not talking of 15-year-olds or 16-year-olds. I'm talking of 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds. In schools in Delhi, if there are Muslim children in the classroom, one or the other of them would have the experience of being termed Pakistani or go to Pakistan. There are books now written by mothers of children who have had to face this kind of prejudice in our schools. So the poison is kind of being injected at that level.
And non-vegetarian food.
And we have to be very alive and conscious of the same with misogyny, right? If a boy likes a doll, he'll be booed and, ridiculed by his male colleagues. And if a girl wants to play with a car or a gun, maybe again, So we have all these stereotypical, notions. And actually vegetarianism, non-vegetarianism, all that plays out at that level. Also wealth, economic disparity, social disparity plays out in the classroom. I don't know if you've seen this wonderful film called Stanley Ki Dibba. So that film tells you how in a classroom we can practice discrimination, we can practice inequality. So I would think there's a great responsibility on all teachers at all levels. I was addressing a gathering of Anganwadi workers in Bangalore 2 months ago. And they are very conscious about this midday and noon meal scheme. If the cook, Mahesh, you should know this because you're a parliamentarian, if the cook happens to be a Dalit, the upper caste parents will withdraw the children from the school, will not allow the children to eat the meal cooked by a Dalit. This is actually a reality playing out in the schools in this country. And I think as a parliament, you should do something about it. And as civil society, I think we should talk more about it. We've ghettoized the city. If you belong to a minority, if you're a single woman, if you're a divorcee, If you're a single mother, it's so difficult for you to find an apartment on rent. It's impossible, next to impossible. Certain communities can't enter certain areas. I know from in Madras, resident welfare associations have rules that say don't sell or rent out houses to non-vegetarians. So instead of actually becoming more inclusive and more plural, we seem to be going in the other direction. But I'm not losing hope. I'm glad that this foundation has given me the space to speak about this in this hall, sitting next to Mahesh, who may not share my point of view. But that's the beauty of democracy. That's the hope that we have, that we can have these dialogues, we can discuss it in the public domain, and hope for that change to come about.
Let me give you a double negative. I don't disagree with much of what you say.
We'll end on that note. And I don't think there's any disagreement on the normative part of it or the idealism. It's just that we. But the foundation has its work cut out in terms of finding skills for effective resolutions of the problems. Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, sir.